Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cinematic Schematic, the official podcast of the Cinematropolis.com, your home to thoughtful conversations on film. I'm your host, Caleb Masters, and today things are getting bloody, things are getting sexy. It must mean we're talking about the slasher genre. That's right, today we are going to be reviewing Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma, the latest film from Jane Schoenbrun. We are going to do a little bit of follow-up from our State of the MCU conversation. If you've been following the comic book movie news, as a lot of our listeners are, there's been some updates since we did our State of the MCU 2026 last episode. We'll then jump into our icebreaker question, and we'll follow that up with a review of the film Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma. And then that'll be spoiler-free, and then we'll wrap up the show, as we always do, with a spoiler-filled discussion. Joining me today, as always, one of the most enthusiastic fans of the slasher genre that I know. Certainly, if I was stuck at some sort of sleepaway camp situation, he'd be one of my companions that I'd want to be in the life or death situation. Laron Chapman, my co-host, award-winning Oklahoma filmmaker. Welcome back to the show, sir.
I'm so happy to be here. So happy to talk about the movie that we're getting ready to talk about. So, what a treat. What a treat that we have this kind of filmmaking happening, in this era. I'm glad to be born in this space at this time to be able to see something like a creation like this. So very excited to talk about it.
Oh, yes. Listeners may recall, though we did not do a review specific for I Saw the TV Glow, that was on both of our top films of that year, 2024, I believe. So a lot of enthusiasm for all things Jane Schoenbrun on this podcast coming off of I Saw the TV Glow. And to round out the cast, I thought, hey, we've got another Jane Schoenbrun fan that I know very well. She's very passionate about this director. I think, in fact, that was where I first heard about They All Go to the World's Fair. She is a Dead Center programmer, host of Film, Paris Burris. Paris, welcome back.
Hey everyone, I'm so excited to talk about a Jane Schoenbrun movie. Got to see it in theaters. I mean, like Laron said, we're getting some good food, much like the characters in the movie.
Oh, juicy chicken, you could say.
We definitely ordered KFC after that. I'm not even kidding. Like, we legit said, we're getting that for dinner, right? That's happening, right? And viewers will know what that means later on as we reference it. But yes.
Laron, we slept on it.
Laron,
we slept on it. We forgot to order chicken strips with dipping sauce for the episode today. Listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation or any of our past or future episodes, perhaps you should like the show, should subscribe to the show on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. Comment below the video. Let us know what you thought of Jane Schoenbrun's latest film. We're going to be talking about all that and more. Again, best way you can support the show, hit us up, social media channels on Instagram at the Cinematrop or the Cinematropolis.com. First, make a quick programming announcement. This is our last show of the summer, or at least deep dive review of the summer, I should say. So we're going to be taking a short break to get geared up for the very busy fall movie season. So we're going to be back next week with a summer 2026 wrap up. It's just going to be Laron and I just mostly talking about some of the films that we didn't see, talking about the highlights, talking about how the box office is back, baby. Because this is, I think, we are tracking to, surpass 2019 potentially at the box office, which is a big milestone coming out of COVID. So we'll be talking about all that more next week. And then we'll be on a break hiatus until Wednesday, September 23rd, where we're going to be reviewing the new Zach Kreger movie, Resident Evil. Or hold on. We're going to be reviewing the new Zach Kreger movie, Resident Evil. Big fan of the games over on this podcast. And then 2 weeks after that, we'll be back with our review of Digger. That's right. Tom Cruise is back to save the day, ? That's going to come out on October 7th. And then we'll be off to the races. Prestige movie season. There's the fall holiday blockbuster season Lots of things to talk about. It's going to be a great time of the year. And in the meantime, between all these little major episodes, we are going to be publishing some little mini reviews. If you've been following us on Instagram or watching our YouTube shorts, you can catch those reactions, usually 2 to 3 minute reactions or out of the theater reviews of a number of different films. I think we've got things like Coyote versus Acme right around the corner is one that, by the way, you should go see it. I haven't even seen the movie, but it needs your money. But films like that, you can catch that on our Instagram at the Cinematrop or on YouTube. Lastly, Laron, in the midst of all this craziness, Liam, not only are we gearing up for the fall movie season on the podcast, you are gearing up for your next movie to make the world quiet. So I know you're going to be sort of in and out, working behind the scenes, behind the camera. Anything you want to share with listeners today about that film as you gear it for production this fall?
It's moving along nicely. It's coming together, and I am just about 7 weeks away from getting ready to start the process. And so I'm very excited to do that. I'm getting to make my first horror movie, so that's really awesome. It took a long time, but we're here.
Alrighty, to make the world quiet. More on that later date. Laron, we're very excited about all things happening in your world. I'm also excited about the X-Men. People on this podcast are tired of us harping on the X-Men and how much we miss them. It's been a years-long journey. We talked about it in our most recent episode, our Spider-Man Brand New Day review. We also did a State of the MCU. And Laron, wouldn't you know it, just about 3 days after our episode published, there was some major news. So at the D23 Expo, that is basically Disney's own Comic-Con, where they're all about all things Disney. They talk about Star Wars, animated films, amusement parks, all the things. Well, they had a little segment for Marvel, and we noted that they didn't say anything about X-Men at the San Diego Comic-Con. It's because they were saving it for D23. First and foremost, the film is going to be released on May 5th, 2028. So mark your calendars, Laron. We've already been to the funeral for Blade with Mahershala Ali. At least we have this to look forward to. Another reason to stay alive, as you would say, for the X-Men. We got the partial casting announcement. Most notably, those who joined Kevin Feige on the stage were Christopher Abbott, who's going to play Charles Xavier, Indy Neveretti. We all thought she might play Mystique. No, we were wrong. She's going to play Rogue. Maya Boyd will play Storm. And then there was a lot of speculation that Adam Driver would be in the film. There was a lot of rumors buzzing around, and everyone thought he was going to play Magneto. But no, he will not be playing Magneto. He will be playing Nathaniel Milbury, a.k.a. Mr. Sinister. That's the guy who tends to be very obsessed with Jean Grey and Scott Summers and all the cloning, all that fun stuff. Again, we had Sadie Sink as Jean Grey on stage, Kit Connor as Cyclops, and then Samara Weaving as Emma Frost. All of them on the stage at D23. Laron, want to get your thoughts on this. What did you think of the announcements so far?
Well, I was really happy to see Indy Neveretti just pivot really quickly from obsession into like full blown Marvel casting. That seems like a winning ticket, if your career is on the up and up. And with various opinions about obsession, everywhere. But in terms of, I think it's the consensus though is that I think that Indy Neveretti was fantastic in the role. And I'm just really excited to see her pivot to that. So I'm very excited to see a new take on Rogue. Of the other ones, I'm very excited that they went with a no name for Storm. I've always think that's a hard casting choice, and I love it.
Theater background too. No name for the big screen, but apparently prolific on the stage.
Yeah, which is really great. I like that I don't know exactly what this combination of actors is going to bring to it. That makes it exciting than picking people that we've seen in everything, and then they're just getting oversaturated and it kind of feeling like you already know what take they're going to bring to it. So very excited to see that there's some no names, some new names, and a couple of familiar people like Samara Weaving was one we know, but I think that's a good choice. And then I think Kit Connor, I think that's the Heartstopper, one of the lead actors in that, and that's a show I quite enjoyed. So it looks like they're going very young with the casting, and I appreciate that as well. We've seen middle-aged X-Men. We're going to see the younger versions of that, and I think that'll be fun and fresh and different. So,
yeah, no, very cool. I think I echo all of those things. Paris, are you an X-Men fan? Do you have any thoughts on this X-Men casting?
I mean, in general, like I watched X-Men growing up and always enjoyed like the movies, but I don't keep up with it very much. And Marvel in general, like, I'm just kind of very like there are a lot of movies I really enjoy, but overall I'm just kind of like I don't know. I think there is a exhaustion that's come with it as well. So but I firstly I will say like it's not to say that casting someone who like looks exactly like the character is always good casting, but Samara Weaving as Emma Frost couldn't be more perfect, I feel like.
Yeah.
Also, I really love Samara Weaving and I think she's such a powerhouse and is going to be so like good in that character. I'm really happy for Indy Navarrete being cast in such a big film franchise. I think that's like an incredible opportunity for her. I also just hope though that this doesn't mean that she is putting the indie stuff behind her, because
Mhm.
we see that all the time of how like directors or actors will come out with a really great like indie debut and then immediately kind of get shoveled into the IP kind of world. And so I'm excited for her and I think she'll be great. I just hope that she'll still do things like,
Yes.
Obsession and not just kind of get sucked into the blockbuster IP realm and stay there forever.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good take. I think honestly, because I think what it was, oh, she just won the Oscar for Honora. How dare I forget her name? Mikey Madison. Mikey Madison was offered something in the realm of one of these films, and I think that she passed on it. Basically, thinking about the long term commitment it was going to be, and what have you, and also being more interested in other things. And I'm really glad that she did that. Like coming fresh off of an Oscar so young, I can kind of see her like she's more interested and more drawn to other things, and I appreciate that pivot, even though she might have been great in whatever role that they would have offered her. So I agree with you about Indy. I certainly hope that it doesn't mean that she goes commercial too quickly. I hope she kind of goes the way of a like Kristen Stewart of sorts, where you started in this big realm and this big tentpole thing, and then you kind of revert it back to your roots and then kind of stayed in that realm. So here's hoping that that's the case. Of course, obviously, chase that money while you can and get the profile while you can, but just remember that you don't have to stay in one lane. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's I was gonna do counterpoint. Counterpoint. She got paid. What was it like $20,000 for Obsession, and is not getting any back end pay as far as I know. And that movie, I mean, someone's getting paid on that one. It certainly
yeah,
isn't her. So I can't blame her for leveraging the moment. I mean, I think she's basically leveraging her moment. Whoever her agent is, or whoever at Marvel, that conversation, it's like, hey, this is your time. Step in, get that bag, get that exposure, and then yes, hopefully the thought is this is sort of you Hugh Jackman, you get that role, that's your foundation, your pillar, your backbone, but then you keep pursuing projects that push you more as a performer, that are a little more indie minded, that are a little more up your own alley creatively. We don't really know what that is for her yet. She's still pretty young, but I certainly hope this does not pigeonhole her. But that said, the older I get, the more I'm like, I can't blame people for taking the opportunity to get paid and get a little bit of exposure. It's tough out there, tougher than ever to get a break like that. A couple other things. Any Boys fans on this podcast? Either of you watch Boys?
it's a show I know that I would enjoy, that my husband puts on, and I see I see the crazy things. I've seen some of the very irreverent things that happen in that show. And I know that I'm like, I would enjoy this, but I've never made the full commitment to sit down and watched it, but I've seen things in passing.
Was Craig excited about the Boys reunion here? Because this is most notably Professor X, Christopher Abbott, and then Adam Driver as Nathaniel Milbury. Just pointing out, reunion of sorts. Whether they share the screen, we'll find out.
Yeah.
But I thought that was kind of fun. I think that to kind of piggyback off what you said about the younger casting, Laron, I think this is a really smart choice. We talked about this in depth in our most recent episode of Spider-Man Brand New Day. People should check that out. But what's most notable is casting Adam Driver as Mr. Sinister, because he is a villain that is primarily, there's a couple of different modes he operates in and types of storylines he operates in. Usually they are focused on Jean Grey and Cyclops. So the fact that they're introducing him as the likely villain for this film, they didn't say he's the villain. They didn't call him Mr. Sinister. That's the one thing that I'm like, maybe they're still playing it. But either way, he's in the film as a character who is obsessed with those characters. It kind of leads me to believe that, yes, we are going to be building this new X-Men around Jean Grey and Scott Summers. So that's kind of neat. And I think it's notable that the young cast is mostly either up-and-comers or no-names, while the more elder characters are very well known. I mean, Samara Weaving, as you mentioned, Adam Driver, Christopher Abbott. Those are all pretty big established actors. So I think that's kind of a smart casting choice on the part of Marvel. Bring in the people what you know, or the guys who are going to be in one movie, pay the big bucks, get the theatrical, the clout, and then sort of take your time to kind of nurture the new talent for the younger cast. So do we think we're going to get Magneto or Wolverine, Laron? Those two haven't been cast yet. They haven't said they're not going to be in the film, but they also haven't said they are. And they are certainly two of the more highly exposed characters from the previous.
I can't imagine. I can't imagine you can go this whole series without including them in some capacity. And I feel like they're just playing their hand very safely with those two. That would be my guess, at least, and my hope.
I think they're gonna. I think they might keep Wolverine for the next movie. I don't. He might not show up. Yeah, only because had they not had Hugh Jackman in Deadpool and Wolverine, and maybe Avengers Doomsday. Anyway, the whole other thing. I think the fact that they're bringing him back, and I know the ideas are going to reboot it, but his presence looms so large over that role, it would immediately draw comparisons to that version. And I just think if you were going to recast it, you'd probably want more distance between the old version and the current and whatever the new version is. But
that's good. That's a good point. Yeah.
But I don't know. We'll see. Big shoes to fill, big claws to fill, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. So listeners, what are your thoughts on the X-Men casting announcements? You can let us know if you're watching on YouTube by commenting below, or you can send us an email at thecinemetropolis@gmail.com. Let's move on to our icebreaker question. Now, this film, the Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma, I always say it wrong. Miasma. Sorry. This film, Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma, is set based around a fictional franchise in a movie within a movie. So I thought it might be fun just to talk about what are some of our favorite in-fiction franchises. So to you, ask the question, Laron Chapman, what is your favorite in-fiction franchise in a film, television show, or movie?
Okay, so I thought about this very hard, and I was instructed before this that I could not use Scream's stab, but also I probably wouldn't have, because it'd be a little too obvious for people who know me too well. I actually, the one that I kind of landed on, and I'm going to reference to, was Tropic Thunder, which I just recently rewatched. And I think the film that they're making is called Tropic Thunder as well. But it's just, I think the in-movie characterization in that, in that whole entire film is just wildly hilarious. And so that would be my first pick. The other one that I think is just a playful one that we see every Christmas time is the black and white film that is in both of the Home Alone movies, which for the longest time I assumed was a real movie. And
Merry Christmas, you filthy animal.
Exactly. Like I was like agonizing trying to find the movie, and it's like, no, it's not. It's actually made for the movie. And I think that's really fun because it does seem like the kind of movie that would have been made during the era that they're referring to. But I always find I always laugh during both of those scenes in both of those movies, whenever they're recreating the shooting and everything in the different places. But those are two pretty well-known ones that I thought I'd reference. So
get on your hands and knees and tell me you love me.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's good stuff. Great selections there. I also think Tropic Thunder might be one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. Almost, we're coming up on 20 years soon. Paris Burris, what is your favorite in-fiction franchise in a film, television show, or video game? Excuse me.
Yeah. I don't know if you would consider it like a franchise, but it's like more so of a fictional piece of work within another fictional piece of work, which is Six Sad World from Daria, the animated show.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so Six Sad World from Daria, it's like, firstly, I love Daria. It's one of my favorite like animated shows. And I just love Six Sad World for many reasons. Like, firstly, I think the aesthetic of it is just always so like iconic. When you see the logo of it, you know immediately what it is. But I also like how just funny and silly and goofy it is. You kind of just never know what to expect from it, and it kind of, in the 90s when this was playing, it's now looking back on it, it's kind of prophetic in a way, because you could compare it to what we would now consider like brain rot and
Mm.
just all the doom scrolling we do on our phones, and like all the fake news and just like ridiculous stuff that we are exposed to every day on a daily basis. And also you could argue that we are, the title of Six Sad World is not inaccurate to what a lot of what we see on our TVs and internet and phones and things like that. And so it's just kind of cool to like look back on it and see how relevant it is to
Yeah.
our experiences today. So that's my pick, Six Sad
Man, I
World.
loved Daria growing up, and now I want to go back and rewatch Daria. That makes me think. I didn't think animated for this. I would have went probably with like Quailman from like
Quailman.
from Doug. From Doug, I watched Doug like
So good.
religiously. So yeah, like there's a lot of them, and now that I think of it, like in different mediums too. So
Doug had Quailman and what was the spy? Yeah, I can't remember the spy character's name, but he had like, there was like where he played like a suave spy.
Yeah.
And yeah, animated. The 90s, man, we had a good, I mean, listen, as a millennial, sounding like an old person, 90s were pretty great when it came to fiction. And also, you go look at it, the future was written in the 90s. There was a lot of things that worked its way into the fiction that have since come to pass. I think Daria is an interesting one. Metal Gear Solid 2 basically called the entire misinformation sort of deal we're in right now. Yeah, a lot of stuff. We were thinking about the right stuff, and it's too bad we didn't act on it in the right way. So man, there's so many good ones in here. So my wife finally asked the question. We recently relocated to Seattle, PNW, last fall. My wife has never watched Twin Peaks, so we started our Twin Peaks watch. First time I ever watched it since college. And within Twin Peaks, of course, is Invitation to Love, which is a soap opera that the citizens of Twin Peaks watch in that show, that often echoes what is about to happen or just happened in the mystery that is unfolding for viewers. So I wanted to give a shout out to that one. And then, personal favorite, Galaxy Quest. Man,
Yeah.
I just got to say, such a charming, endearing, silly fictional universe within the world they've built that is, echoing Star Trek. Unabashed fan of that movie. I think it's a great time, and sort of riffs in the right way. It riffs and sort of serves as a love letter to Star Trek and Star Trek fandom. So really like that movie.
Great movie.
Yeah, fun stuff. You could also throw in Bounty Law from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood for all the Tarantino heads who are still out there. That's a fun one. Listeners, do you have a favorite fiction within a fiction? You can let us know. Send us an email at thecinemetropolis@gmail.com or comment below the video. With all that said, it is now time for our review of Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma.
Out here, there are certain nights when you just get this feeling that some psycho killer is gonna chop you up into a million little pieces. Oh, I like that feeling.
I don't want to make another dumb sequel in the Camp Miasma franchise. I don't want to make a remake of a remake of a remake. I want to make something that feels fresh and new.
So according to IMDb, Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma is described as a director making a slasher sequel becomes obsessed with casting the original film's final girl, leading both women into psychological and sexual chaos. Here are a few notable things about the film. This is the third feature directed by Jane Schoenbrun. I just want to clarify right now, Jane's preferred pronouns are they, them. So that's what we'll be using throughout the discussion. This film also stars Hannah Einbinder as Chris Williams and Gillian Anderson as Billy Presley. The film made its debut on May 13th at the Cannes Film Festival, where it won the Queer Palm Award, and then it started its U.S. release rollout on August 4th. So it is in the rollout stage still. So, for example, in LA and New York, it opened on August 7th, I believe. Then Seattle the weekend following, and then other major markets on August 14th. OKC just got it August 21st, and I think there's still other markets that are still yet to get the film. So take a look at your local listings. There's a good likelihood that this film is playing in a theater near you and you didn't realize it, or it's about to, starting next weekend. The film has a production budget of $10 million and has grossed $4.4 million so far. This is a big one. Laron, maybe we'll kick it off real quick. The three of us could talk about our relationship with the director. And actually, Paris Burris, I'll start with you. What is your overall thoughts and experience with Jane's work so far?
Yeah, I first saw We're All Going to the World's Fair, which is Jane Schoenbrun's directorial feature debut. And I immediately fell in love with that movie. It was my introduction to the director and just felt so for me and so different and fresh, but also just dealing with things like nostalgia and the internet as a young person growing up, and just a lot of the things that you experience, especially me, being a millennial and having a very interesting relationship with the internet and having a computer, because I remember times before having a computer and having access to the internet. And so I was very young when it was introduced to me. And anyways, I think that movie explores a lot of the things that a lot of millennials can find really relatable in many ways, but obviously it takes it in a very dramatic, dark way. And the lead actress in that, Anna Cobb, I'm so enamored with her, and I hate that I haven't seen her in more things. I saw that movie and I was like, oh my gosh, I want to see her more things. The last thing I saw her in, I believe, was Bones and All. And I just think she's brilliant. I really want to see Anna Cobb in more things. And so I'm still keeping my fingers crossed for that. But yeah, and that was my introduction. And then I saw the TV Glow, which was Jane's second movie. And then I saw Camp Miasma, of course, just a couple of nights ago. And my relationship with Jane's movies is, I find both as a person and a director, I find them to be extremely fascinating and very intelligent, both just their perspectives and interactions with media, and they seem to be very interested in themes of nostalgia and just our relationship to media, and also queerness, whether that be implicit or explicit portrayals and explorations of it. It feels like something that is, Jane feels like a director where they really are making things that are so one of one and so singular, and I think that that's just so refreshing to see. But at the same time, they have a love for the classic tropes and the things that we do see in movies time and time again, and how that is, it's not all about just being different or being new. It's appreciating the things that make movies beloved traditionally and historically too. So it's just so fascinating to watch Jane's movies, because I always walk away getting something that I never could have expected. And I also have no idea what to expect for the next one. I just know it's going to be fascinating and really good. And I'm just really excited about this director.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you used the word singular there. I definitely think Jane is a singular director, no doubt. It might seem like too early to say, but they definitely are one of the like seemingly premier voices of this generation. Now, that said, for a very specific kind of film, they've only made 3 films, but also no one else is making films about things like this and executing them in such a specific way. So I one of a kind and singular is a great way to describe Jane. Laron, what is your relationship with Jane Schoenbrun's work?
I don't think she knows this, but I actually have Paris to thank for being introduced to Jane, because I had never seen anything. I was very excited for I saw the TV Glow. I think we were at South by Southwest where it was going to have one of its premieres, and that wound up getting botched because a whole bunch of things. But I just remember I was like, well, if I'm going to watch this and I'm really excited for, I should probably see what they made before. And I went and viewed that and was very wowed by that. And so was very excited about whenever I saw the TV Glow did in fact come out. And I remember just feeling like really exposed by the media. And I thought that was interesting. Like I've rarely seen a movie. I've seen movies that I feel like I connect to, but this felt like someone going through my subconscious and finding those very, very vulnerable feelings at a very specific time in my life, and projecting them for everyone to see and feeling very exposed by that. Of course, no one knowing that was my experience, but still feeling like those were private thoughts that I had that are now, and I realize now were shared by someone else. And that's a very unique viewing experience, and so not just the relationship with media, but just also like what it's like to exist as a queer person in the world, how you navigate that, and at specific times in history where what societal attitudes were towards it, what kinds of media were had these kind of subliminal messages for those people to see, even if they weren't able to explicitly say them. It's kind of if there's things there that were embedded in it that felt like you were seen in a very specific way, and it evoked a certain feeling that, again, I haven't felt since I was a very young child. And so I felt like I saw the TV Glow in particular was a very enlightening experience in many different ways. And I felt very similar to the film we're about to discuss, for different reasons, but also also in some of the same ways. And so a very fascinating filmmaker. But I love that it's also, as we've spoke at length about I Saw the TV Glow together, you and I, Caleb, on and off of the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's good to see that even though there is an inherent queerness to the text, that there is still also something that is kind of universal for anybody who's ever felt like an outlier in any type of way,
Mm-hmm.
and how media has been kind of a vessel through a way of channeling, those kinds of feelings and having an escape or having somewhere to put those feelings and interpret those feelings and kind of understand yourself and how you exist in the world. And so for a movie to do that is really pretty remarkable. And to have done it 3 times now is why I'm just so excited for this filmmaker, because I feel like they're making movies for me specifically at this point, and that's really cool. So.
And it's not just like you specifically, like in the right demographic. It's like this is hyper specific.
Yes,
I think that's really what floored me about. I saw the TV Glow. That is that film. I think you already eloquently put it. It feels so highly specific that when I was watching it, I'm like, dang. This feels like it knew my lived experience growing up, as in you're a person pre-internet watching it, obsessed with a TV show as sort of an escape mechanism from, the day-to-day life. Also as a bridge to making friendships who are your sort of outcasts. Anyway, just a number of things about that feel incredibly specific, especially as you take that loving passion into adulthood, kind of like how have those things informed who I am today, for better and for worse, and all those things. It hyper specific. But no, I mean, I saw TV Glow was that floored me. 2024 top 5 film of the year. I think it's probably, if you were to ask me today, probably my top 25 of the 2020s so far. Outstanding film. We All Go to the World's Fair. Going back to that film, I mean, how many horror movies do you know about the creepypasta of the internet? How the internet and that sort of connectivity and that myth making you explore online builds community, but community that can also and like sort of hurt you as much as it helps you, and again inform who you are and how you look at the world. Just was really impressive stuff. That brings us to Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma. What did we think of this film, though? It sounds like you guys were both pretty excited for it. So I'll throw it to you first, Laron. What did you think of Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma?
Yeah, so I saw this yesterday, so I'm very, very, very fresh on it. But I already was locked in, from the first frame, the first title sequence. Like I was just in love with the marriage of all of the things that I love: horror films, like adolescent, like angst, burgeoning sexuality, like just different. All of these different elements that I always kind of connected to the coming of age film because I had a very unusual childhood. That's a different podcast, but I will say that because I didn't have a traditional coming of age story, I feel like so many I have a longing for that still, in a weird way. And so I see different coming of age stories that have like the promise of something that maybe I didn't get to experience personally. And then also just understanding how when I love something, it's not just like, it might be a silly B movie, but there's something specific about that movie that at a specific time that I watched it, like why I connected to it so deeply. And it's sometimes something subtextual that has nothing to do with the actual story, and I feel like what's interesting about Jane's work is that the movies that they're referencing are like the same ones that did those things for me. So and I saw the TV Glow, the in-universe television show was very referential of like Buffy. I was like, Buffy was specifically something that I watched that I use as in that same manner. And so that's why the weird parallels of experience and is so fascinating with each film. And with this, the slasher film genre, the metatextual nature of it, just the fun needle drops. There's some incredible needle drops in this. I'm like, this is my soundtrack, so it's there's just a lot of things about this that I really, really, really admired. And
you're so you're a Counting Crows fan then?
I am a Counting Crows fan. Yes. So the needle drop that is used in this in a very specific way is now I will forever refer to that scene when I think of that song. So yes, really big feelings about this one. Still processing it in many ways because it is a very layered film. I think it's something that we'll appreciate over time. But just on a surface level, it looks incredible. The performances are great. I'm really glad Hannah Einbinder is getting some interesting work to chew into. I'm a huge fan of Hacks on HBO. I'm going to keep selling that to people as much as I can for anybody that wants to see more of her work. But it's nice to see Gillian Anderson in something juicy, like this. And this film is just so playful. And as Paris said, their work is just it's so cerebral and intellectual, but then it's also playful and has that same campiness that you kind of love in the movies that they're referencing also. So I enjoyed it quite a bit.
All right. Let's turn to you, Paris Burris. What did you think of Camp Miasma?
I just like Laron, I just saw this last night, and so it's very fresh in my mind. I think there is so much that I still need to process about it. There's just so much to unpack about the movie, and I feel like it would be impossible to really, even if I had processed it all, I probably couldn't fit everything into one podcast episode. But I loved it and I had a really good time, and it's definitely one of those movies it's very rewatchable and I think would be rewarding on multiple watches because there are a lot of things happening, and I feel like I probably didn't quite register everything that was happening on a first watch, and so I'm excited to rewatch it at some point, and I'm almost positive that I'll discover more layers to it that probably didn't even fully register the first watch. I really love how we've talked about how unique Jane's movies are, and I think that it goes without saying to say that this is something that I've never seen before, and I think only Jane could execute in this way. It's not to say that the idea of like, oh, are we living in a movie? Are we living in a simulation? Is any of this real? Like, I don't think those things are necessarily like things that haven't been explored before in movies, but I don't think it's ever been really explored in the way that this movie explores it. And I love something about Jane's films that, as a queer person, I feel that Jane is exploring queerness in a way that is filling a lot of gaps that have not been filled before. Because I think over time we see more, in many ways, queer representation in movies and media in general. But I think that there are few pieces of media that really truly explore queerness as a way of experiencing and seeing and interacting with the world around you. It's not just sexual orientation, it's not just gender identity. I think those things can be and often are part of the conversation and the experience, but it's not just those things. And so I think that with Jane's films, we're seeing more nuanced portrayals and exploration of what queerness is and what it looks like and feels like, even more
Yeah.
importantly. And that's what I really love about this film. I also just really love the tone of it. I think it is a really hard balance to strike when you have something that is very, very deep and emotional and meaningful, but also riotous and funny and just raunchy and campy and just, just fun. It's really hard to, you're balancing elements of horror, you're balancing elements of comedy, you're balancing elements of drama and sex and all of these things. And it's hard to really like pull that off where they all come through in equal measure. And I think that that's really what I love about it, is the tone that it strikes of, it's really hard sometimes to go from something that's deep and emotional and meaningful, and then 2 seconds later you're, going into something that's just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I love that it does take itself seriously, but it doesn't take itself too seriously. And the comedy doesn't really, I mean, maybe there are some moments where I'm a little iffy on who is the brunt of the joke here. But it's very self-aware in who it's making fun of. And I just, it's a fun time, and I'm a big fan.
Yeah, I think it really is a lot to unpack with this particular film. So I didn't publish my Letterboxd review until last night because I really, so context, I saw a TV Glow, like I said, top 25. I was like ready to love this movie unabashedly. I'm like going in, that's probably not fair. I did not connect with this movie in the same way. So I spent a solid week really trying to like unpack why that was. Let me just say this though. I still think this is an outstanding work, and it is certainly continuing to be singular. I think what I struggle is, Paris, you were talking about how the film shifts tones dramatically. And that, I think, for me personally, was why I struggled, because we're going to talk about this more in spoilers, but there are, for me, it felt like there's some dissonance between sort of like the film's main, I would say, like impulses or goals, which is, number one is we're going to poke fun at 80s, 90s slasher films. It's a love letter, but we're also going to make fun of it doing the kind of the Scream or the Cabin in the Woods theme. Also, so that's one thing that it's doing pretty well. It's also sort of exploring, how these movies connect to sex and identity and how they're all intermingled and intertwined, and it's messy. Now, I don't think messy equals bad. I think it just means there's a lot to really unpack. So I would like to see the film again, and probably will before I make my top films of the year list, because there was just something about, like, there's certain beats in like an individual scene where I'm like really connecting. I'm like, I'm in it. I'm honed in on what the movie's doing. It also does a lot of there's a lot of surreal choices in terms of style in the film. So there's a lot of times I'm honing in on that, and then all of a sudden there'll be just some like comedy beat that comes out of left field that really like, takes me out of it. And I'm like, wait, where am I supposed to be at? Am I supposed to be laughing at this thing that we just did? Or was that a thing that we really just did and now we're laughing at something adjacent? So there was like a lot of that kept me off my balance. Now, we'll say this, what I like, and you guys have already said some of this, but the performances are, between Hannah Einbinder and Gillian Anderson, they have unbelievable interpersonal actual chemistry, actor to actor, but also sexual chemistry. And that sort of grounds this like very bizarre Twin Peaksy type characters and a very real emotional truth. So they nailed it. The production design is outstanding. I mean, this is a $10 million budgeted movie. You wouldn't know it. It looks like it's $100 million. The sets look incredible. The cinematography is incredible. It's got like at times it's also like really interesting, again, surreal. I keep going back to the word surreal because you're kind of melding up a few different like stylistic choices. There's times where it feels like almost like Wes Anderson like sets, very symmetrical, framed, and then you'll go right into another scene where it's like, oh, now we're in a Friday the 13th movie.
Yeah.
And the way it usually, and then usually the way those transitions are really, really interesting. So I think all of that stuff is super impressive. And yeah, Laron, you already said, the soundtrack, which is top shelf. The Long December Counting Crows sequence, which I'm sure if you're watching listeners review, it's been name dropped in a lot of reviews as being like an outstanding moment in the film. It is indeed outstanding. It's a oneer for the ages. So all of those things said, I think this is a messy movie. I think it's ambitious. And for me, I come out thinking that was pretty good. I went in expecting another like, I saw the TV Glow like experience. That's probably not fair. Just the bar was incredibly high for me. Still pretty good. Still a must see for 2026. I probably need to see it again before I have a solid like final verdict, but liked it, didn't love it as much as I wanted to. Still a lot to admire though. So just kind of where I come out at. Speaking of TV Glow though, I mean, I think you've already kind of mentioned this, Paris, a little bit in terms of like, there's a lot to unpack. I feel like I saw that TV Glow was pretty focused in terms of style. And there are things I could compare to this film. There's a lot more to unpack in terms of here's style choices with the camera, style choices with the music drops. Here's some different, like multiple types of like subtext going on. How would you kind of compare this film to her previous two films, if you were to kind of like sum it up?
How I would compare this film to their previous films. I mean, it's funny you say this about Camp Miasma, about how like I saw the TV Glow like it was a winner, like blew it out of the park. You really connected with it. And then this one, you still really enjoyed it, but it just didn't hit as hard as I saw the TV Glow. That's kind of how I felt about I saw the TV Glow, which I really loved. We're all going to the World's Fair. Like it just absolutely blew me away. I related and felt and just so strongly about it. And then I really enjoyed I saw the TV Glow. It kind of had that same experience for me of where it didn't hit for me as strongly as We're All Going to the World's Fair. And then Camp Miasma is kind of like, okay, I'm back in it again. Like this one really resonated with me and I really enjoyed it. And so I think that that's, you know, not uncommon maybe with Jane's movies. It's probably, they are all so different. Like, you're seeing similar things, of course, because it's the same director. You're seeing some of the same kind of things explored. You're seeing some of the kind of same stylistic choices or inquiries into some of the same things. Like, I think throughout every single one of Jane's films, a central key theme is nostalgia. Jane seems extremely interested in exploring nostalgia. And so that's something that's definitely a running theme so far in Jane's movies. I think that they're just explored in different ways. And so I don't think it's uncommon, at least, you know, for people to connect with different movies in different ways. And so this one for me was like, oh yeah, no, this feels more like the Jane that like really connects with me and really resonates with me. Not to say that I Saw the TV Glow was a lesser film or I enjoyed it less. There was just something about this one that really just hit for me. And so I love that while Jane is such a singular director, all of their movies are so different and unique. And I mean, you still see the, you know, in I Saw the TV Glow, we're still seeing like the fictional world within a fictional world. You're still seeing, you know, connections of how queerness is like, you know, either explicitly or implicitly implied and explored. I mean, you're still seeing some of the same things that are being explored, but in such different ways. And with Camp Miasma, I would say all of Jane's films feel like horror in some way or another, but this one is explicitly
Yeah.
very genre horror.
Yeah.
And that's fun too, where I would say the other ones are more of like a experimental horror.
Right.
This one really leans into the genre horror of it all, which is a lot of fun. And so, yeah, anyways, yeah, just to sum up, it's interesting to see the threads throughout them and how they at the same time are so wholly unique.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it on that, though. They are exploring a lot of themes. There's a lot of overlap in terms of the things that they're interested in. Nostalgia, a relationship to various forms of pop culture, whether it's a TV show, and I Saw the TV Glow, whether it's the internet lore with We All Went to the World's Fair, or in this case, the slasher film genre, and how those things are both like a emotional, they're an emotional safe space, and how those, the, you know, explicitly, implicitly, psychologically, how those shape who we become as adults, I think is certainly like a common theme explored very different way. I think you nailed that. That's awesome. Laron, I mean, any thoughts on how you would compare this to Schoenbrun's previous films?
Yeah, I think there's also something kind of quietly radical about the way that they recontextualize things that maybe were deeply problematic. You go back and look at some of the things that we even loved from the era, and we're like, actually, this is a pretty misogynistic take, or this is a pretty homophobic take, or this is actually, you know, has all these different, you know, kind of cultural insensitivities, you know, but for whatever reason, we were still drawn to certain elements of it because it's all we had at the time, you know, and so taking that, repurposing that, putting a different gaze over it, you know, allows us to kind of like still appreciate the things that we love despite their imperfections. But it has this kind of, I don't know, this kind of in maybe in a sense of enlightenment, you know, comes over it. And I find that really interesting, with specifically this one. And thinking about some of the horror films that I loved growing up that I now go back and watch, and I cringe at certain moments, but I also remember why it was important to me at the time that it was. And it could be a character, it could be a B storyline, it could be because I think at that age, you know, we were just clamoring, depending on who you were, all different kinds of minority groups for different reasons. But me being a double minority, just clamoring for anything that shared any kind of semblance of what you experienced as you walked through life. Because so many films that I watch, even ones that I loved, just featured characters that didn't have the same experience as me. And so that's why it feels so strange now looking, you know, seeing that someone take those things and now placing those kinds of people and those kinds of experiences into that same text, in a very interesting way, kind of repurposing it, makes it something very unique and very, very new and fresh. And I say radical because we haven't had it, you know. So and I find that really, really, really fascinating with each of these movies, but specifically this one, as we're just kind of leveling up with each movie in terms of what we're taking a microscopic look at, you know, with. So
You know, you used the word radical, Laron, and I think that makes me think about one thing that Jane's bringing to the table with this film specifically in comparison to the previous films: sex. Put the sex back in the cinemas, people. And Paris, you were talking earlier about how they are exploring different things that maybe haven't been explored thoroughly or meaningfully on the big screen. I mean, as a straight person, sort of like looking at whether it's the queer experience or even sexual identity in general, I just think that's like pretty huge gap in especially the 21st century cinema. Thanks Marvel for taking sex out of the cinemas. So I think one thing that Jane does really well here is sex is front and center. And I'm not saying like it's raunchy comedy, but it's also exploring, how does isolation, sexual repression, and identity all sort of like dovetail into one another. And how does the sort of like sexual repression that you might experience in isolation, realize through the films you're watching. I know we'll talk more specifically in spoilers, but I just have to say Jane going hard on really meaningfully talking about like our relationship with, the fantasies that we have, how those are actually a core part of our identities as individuals. And this film really is a sexual awakening story, and among other things. And we really just don't get stories about that. Certainly not from, released by studios like Mubi. So I think that's just one thing that I found to be pretty radical, is a film that's tackling, it was funny growing up in more conservative settings, like, oh my gosh, sex in these slasher movies, it's so sinful and awful. And, they don't actually make movies like that anymore, weirdly. So to see this movie take that context and apply it on the film and actually add some really substantive meaning and exploration to character there, I just think is very radical by today's standards. I don't know, either of you want to add anything on that before we move on?
Have a little bit of a different perspective on this because anyone who knows me knows that I'm very pro sex and very pro nudity and very positive about all of those things being in movies, and have complained time and time again about the lack of sex in this like purity culture when it comes to movies, especially the ones that are in theaters making money, things like that. I think for me, the radical part of this movie is I actually don't feel like the thing that is front and center is sex. I think it's pleasure, and specifically queer pleasure, women's pleasure, things like that. I would actually argue that there's not enough sex in this movie. Like really everything's out of frame.
Yeah.
The only actual sex that we see is implied. You don't really see it. everyone's like either fully clothed or partially clothed, and it's either happening out of frame or so far away that you can't see what's happening. I mean, it's very like there are conversations about pleasure and sex. There are, it's implied, but I kept wanting to actually see like the real sex on screen, and it just really wasn't there. I don't think, there the one scene I think that shows the most is the fictional scene, right? In the old movie,
Yeah.
which still is so like you don't see much.
Yeah.
And then
yeah.
also there's nuances to what even you could consider that as being a problematic portrayal of sex. And so I actually wanted more sex in this. I wanted more nudity. I
Hot
wanted
take. More sex in this, please.
yeah. Show me what's happening. Like, I mean, like, I was just like, man, but I do think the radicalism of it lies in the fact that we are having very blunt and honest, straightforward conversations about pleasure. And I think that's, for me, where more of the radical
and taking the shame away from pleasure as a thing that, like, as something to pursue. It's not some, because there is a certain degree of like, oh, if you go to that place and it's not for the right reasons, then is that, like, and I feel like there is definitely a nice moment kind of exploring that specific idea. And I think what I also found interesting is how this movie is having a interesting conversation about different generations, how they're interpreting, ingesting, and how they view media, and how that those are two different ideas, especially with the two female characters. Like, you have two different attitudes about the film that Gillian Anderson is in, and then how Hannah Einbinder receives it. She's like, yeah, I didn't really think about any of that stuff when I was doing it. She says when they're having that conversation, and she's like, oh, okay. She just describes it as flesh and fluids. That's what this was about, and it's like very interesting, like different takes on that. And I see that happen a lot with our generation, really hearkening back as this idea of like nostalgia, but also like taking the things that we watched at that time and saying what they meant in the larger context of things. And then the older generation, or the generation before, is kind of looking at things somewhat more at face value, and like we really are like mining through it to try and, even with Scream, in the 90s, as an example, it was like a very obvious example, but it was definitely like, let's take these slasher movies that everyone like shit on whenever they were there, and like, let's talk about why they, in our popular culture, why they mattered to all these people, and so in an interesting way, I feel like it's doing that, but it's doing that also talking about how these films kind of culturally cultivated our worldview, for better or for worse, even negative messaging that we're unlearning or deprogramming ourselves from as we've gotten older, and seeing how now through a new lens with a new mature kind of more evolved perspective, how these films, while again having somewhat problematic themes and problematic messaging, might have been the thing that saved a lot of people's lives at that particular time, just because there was one thing in it that made them feel like they were a part of the world, whereas everything else, had this kind of exclusive, like kind of like, uninviting kind of nature to it, where it's like, I'm not seen anywhere, so I guess I'm Buffy the Vampire Slayer. You know what I mean? Like, that,
Yes.
like that's the one thing I get. I'll take it. Like I saw myself in Buffy. She's a female character, but for whatever reason, that's the character that I was drawn to the most, because there weren't a lot of references otherwise. So.
I think it's a radical act to let yourself enjoy things, especially when you are underrepresented in media, because this is something that Roxane Gay touches on in her book Bad Feminist, which is she calls herself a feminist, and how she in her car listens to very vulgar rap music and very demeaning towards women and all of those things. but how you can hold two truths at the same time, and how if you were only allowing yourself to enjoy things that were quote unquote made for you, then
Mhm.
you really, there's a whole world of media that you're missing out on. So I think it's a radical thing to let yourself enjoy the things that you enjoy, whether they were made for you or not.
Mhm.
Because if we were playing by those rules, then there's very little
Yeah.
that some
Mhm.
of us would be able to actually enjoy.
Yeah. Fair.
Yeah, man. I have like three thoughts. Number one, sorry, response. Okay, most immediately, actually, Paris, on that note, I think to what you and Laron were saying here is, I think what's a thing that Jane has also touched on, at least this in TV Globe, but probably all three of their films, are how a thing can get created in a vacuum
Mhm.
for totally different purposes, that someone somewhere else on the internet, broadcast on television, a movie hundreds of miles away, they can see this thing at any given point in time, and it can have a profound unintended impact on their life. Laurent, you said it could be saving their life. It could be
Mhm.
helping them learn something about themselves. So I think that's like a great through line. And I think that continues here. So I think that's a big one. And I think especially as you're speaking about like, for a lack of representation, well, where else are you going to find meaning but in other places where there is something you can connect to or latch onto. So being seen, probably, intentional or not, being seen through the human experiences expressed in media, I think's one idea that is really done well here. Paris, to the pleasure versus sex thing, I think that's a totally fair assessment. And I don't think we see a lot, but I do think like sex as the vehicle for pleasure, which is the vehicle for identity, is like, we'll talk about more in spoilers, honestly. But I think for me, there's a connected line. There's there's a pretty lengthy connected like dotted line. She's touching on a lot of different things that, whether it's not the sex, but the sex is the vehicle for pleasure. When having the pleasure, she's got these fantasies, and it kind of reminds her of like, hey, I'm trying to discover this part of me that I saw in this movies. There's just a lot of things that are operating there. So I'm really excited to dig into that more in spoilers, because it's not about sex, but I think the pleasure point is accurate. But I do think it's about identity. And while the actual sex is not explicit, I mean, there's
Super explicit. Yeah.
you see it expressed through fantasies, I think, was
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
and the symbolism, which we'll talk about more, is pretty undeniable. I would argue. Now,
Yeah.
is it some down and dirty sex like, you from like this, that you could expect to see? No, it's not. It's a lot more surreal and sort of like leaning into, I think, the imagery the movie is evoking rather than like being like right on the screen. But so much more to talk about in spoilers. Before we do, let's go ahead and give this a letter grade. So, Paris Burris, I'll turn to you first. What letter grade would you give Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma?
I think I'll give it an A minus.
Oh, very nice. A minus, very strong. Coming out with this less than 24 hours too. So, we'll see how that goes as you process the film. Laron, Chapman, what letter grade would you give the film?
I'm also an A minus. I don't think it's perfect. I think there are some things that I need to work through with it. Just in general, like there's so much, as we mentioned, to unpack. It's very layered. It's a very layered film. But I also think that it's just, again, so exciting that we have a filmmaker who from that community being able to again recontextualize this in a different way, so that a whole different generation is going to have a film, to be able to dissect and talk about in the same way that we did the media prior to this, that wasn't really allowed to explore it with the same freedom, as this filmmaker is. And that's really awesome that gets to exist for them, and that we also didn't age out before we got to watch it too, and so that's really cool. But I'd give it an A minus. I think it's a very strong film, third film from this filmmaker.
Yeah. Well said. So 2 A minuses. I expect by the time I talk to you guys in December, you're both going to have that. That's going to appreciate. I'm fairly confident. So can't wait to have more conversations with you guys about this movie in the months ahead. I'm going to give this a B for Big Beautiful Mess. I really admire a lot about this film. I can't wait to watch it again because I think to your point, Paris, this is a very layered movie. I literally spent a week trying to unpack why I didn't like fall head over heels for it. There's a lot there that I probably missed too. So very eager to see it. Again, I think this is an outstanding third feature from Jane Schoenbrun. I can't wait to see what they do next. Well, if we were going to recommend some alternate media to our listeners or viewers today, what would you recommend? Could be a movie, television show, novel, video game, what have you. And Laron Chapman, I'll throw it to you first.
Okay, I'm going to do the letterbox 4 because I feel like all these things merged, to kind of like create what this movie is. One of them is a David Lynch film, Mulholland Drive, that reminded me quite a bit of that as I was watching that, especially the relationship between the two female characters. Another film, Cabin in the Woods, an obvious metatextual movie dealing kind of very campily with all of these different genre tropes and what have you. Friday the 13th, and very obvious one because it's referenced pretty directly here in many different ways. And then the last one, an artsy film, which happens to be a good friend of ours, Sunrise Tipicani's favorite movie, Clouds of Sils Maria. And this is a movie with Kristen Stewart and Juliette Binoche. And the reason I include this in this smorgasbord of different titles is because that is also a movie about generations, different generations of actresses. In one case where the mature actress in it, Juliette Binoche, once played a younger character, and then a younger Chloe Moretz is playing that same character at a different age, and now Juliette Binoche is forced to play the older character, but she still connects to the younger character and feels like I'm not supposed to play this character. I'm still in that space, and there's an interesting duality, like blurring of lines between fiction. And like, there's moments where we see her doing script reads or, with script readings with Kristen Stewart's character, her personal assistant. And you are never sure, because we don't know what the movie is. We only hear it being referenced. If the line readings that they are having are them in real life having this argument or conversation, or if it's in the movie or they're just playing on the scenes in that film. And they work really remarkably well in both contexts. And I feel like that blurring of the lines that we see in Teenage Death and Sex Miasma has a lot of playfulness in that way too, where like, is she experiencing this? Is this in her head, or is this happening? Is this really all one thing? Is life really all simulation, or is this the creative process shown abstractly while they're creating this new reboot of this new film? And I found that those parallels very interesting. And so those would be 4 recommendations I'd have for this.
I did the letterbox 4. Very nice. Laron Chapman. Paris Burris, what else would you recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, if you are someone who has not seen We're All Going to the World's Fair, I feel like that movie has gotten not enough love as Jane's other movies. So please go watch that. You won't regret it. And I feel like I don't have enough people to talk to about that movie. So
and it's on HBO, so you can check it out if you have that. It's like right there.
No excuse. You can have a Jane Schoenbrun marathon if you'd like with the film, starting with We All Go to the World's Fair. Definitely.
Yeah. Yes. And so I would also say, man, this movie, I don't know if it was the setting or what, but it just kept reminding me of Silent Hill in so many ways.
Yeah.
Like, if you're looking for a good horror game, I mean, there are many Silent Hills, but any of them, just if you're into that like foggy, wintry, dark, cold world, just check those out if you haven't, or replay them if you have.
Little Death is definitely inspired by that character.
The first thing that I said, because I saw this with my friend Kirsten, I turned to her and I was like, so this is like Pyramid Head if he was like from Wish. Like,
yeah.
And so, I don't know, just if you're looking for those vibes, go for that. I would also say, I would say, please, if you are looking for something that is also exploring lesbian or queer repressed desire, go watch Desert Hearts. It explores like that sexual repression by way of like a lesbian relationship between two women who are of different generations. But it has the hottest sex scene that you will have seen in a while. And so it would be my recommendation if you're kind of leaning more towards that exploration of identity and connection and love and sex and repressed desire and freedom and all of those things. So yeah, those would be my recommendations.
Oh, all great recommends. By the way, Silent Hill 2 came out, is on PlayStation, Xbox, PC, and there's a new one coming out this year. Oh gosh, I'm forgetting the name of it. There's a new one coming out like in a month, and it looks really awesome. And it's like set in Scotland. First person vibes are on point. Anyway, Silent Hill, we're big fans on the show. Check out the games, check out the movie. All the things. On the video game recommendation, this is not going to be novel. I feel like this has been brought up multiple times. Go play The Quarry. We've mentioned it before. If you're wanting to see, if you want to play a game that feels like the Camp Miasma in fiction movies that we're watching, just go play those games. You can choose your own adventure. It's an interactive movie, essentially, with a number of A-list talent, including, I think, Justice Smith is in that one. There's Sam Raimi. Anyway, good cast. I'm also going to throw out the 2020 Christopher Langdon film Freaky, starring Vince Vaughn. A lot sillier, a lot more playful. The Oma, not nearly as deep as by any stretch of the imagination, as deep as Camp Miasma, but a fun, playful exploration of sort of gender and identity via the lens of an 80s slasher horror type of thing. And then, I don't know, this one's not novel, but if you're a younger listener and you haven't seen Nightmare on Elm Street 2, you should probably go check it out. Just gonna say that kind of was historically a really major film for identity and queer characters in film, while having to like not be officially about that. It's definitely about that if you have not watched Nightmare on Elm Street number 2. All right. Well, if you don't want to be spoiled on teenage sex and death at Camp Miasma, go ahead and tune out now.
I could swear I heard something.
I'm hungry.
Oh,
God.
be quiet.
Oh, my God. My God.
All right. Well, let's spoil this thing, and I don't know. Maybe we'll jump right into the sort of the sexual awakening conversation, because maybe Paris, we have a different disagreement, or we can unpack it a little more. Because when I was watching this film, it's like about a lot of different things. It's about loving movies, making movies, satirizing horror franchises, but also it's about like learning about yourself and what brings you pleasure. Why do you fantasize about certain things? Is it okay to fantasize about those things? Like all these things that I think are, I would say, if I was going to sum up the movie, what the movie's about, among other things, it would be about experiencing a sexual awakening via the means of movies. Again, that's a hyper simplification, but like that's kind of the idea that really stuck out to me as I was chewing on it. So I'm just curious, like how did this film explore that sort of sexual fantasy or desire?
I think that there is an argument to be made that Chris, the main character here, probably had her sexual awakening when she was 8 years old watching this movie on VHS.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that many people have had sexual awakenings watching films when they were much too young to be watching them, and that's how a lot of queer people discover that they're queer. you know, and so Chris talks about finding this VHS tape and watching it when she was 8, and we actually get like this clip of her that's a flashback of her watching it.
Yeah.
And then she specifically talks about moments where, you know, she's fantasizing about becoming the final girl.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, that entails like, you know, running through the forest, you know, half naked with your nipples poking out of your shirt, and like, you know, just like all of these things that she obviously saw when she was a very young age. And so I think that kind of to me is more the sexual awakening. But I also think that there's a lot of shame that is part of that conversation. You know, I don't get the idea that this is something that she's told many people, maybe not anyone. And I think it's also part of like gender expression too, like when you see a woman in a film and you want to become that woman, right? Like you want to experience what that feels like. That's also like a lot of part of like gender expression too. And so there's just a lot to unpack there. But I do think that the character does go through maybe a secondary kind of sexual awakening where they realize that this is something that wasn't just an unattainable experience or fantasy for them. It's something that can be achieved with another person. And so I think that is an awakening of itself. And so I think that, yeah, there's definitely an argument to be made that there's different portrayals of sexual awakenings at different points in one's life, and how one can be very isolated and very much done in solitude, and maybe in shame or repression, and how this experience for her allows her to explore a different kind of sexual awakening. Even though it's more it's more of a psychological, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, I mean, sort of my read on it was, I think you kind of alluded to this earlier. It's sort of her kind of taking ownership or admitting to her, both herself and publicly as someone else, that this is a thing that she's fantasized about, which is in a sort of a way for her taking control of her identity, or at least a part of her identity, in a way that perhaps she had not done before. Because whether it's because she repressed those feelings or thoughts, or just kept them within herself, or kept them private, it was a thing that, yes, it didn't seem attainable. Because kind of a thing I was wondering, I was like, has she even, before she's talking to Bill, because Billy's there like poking at her the whole time, she's like, yeah, it's all just flesh and fluids. Like there's nothing to it. So why are you over intellectualizing this entire thing? That's what you're after, right? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like where the conversation breaks off, and she's constantly kind of picking at her to kind of get deeper and deeper and deeper. And I think Billy sort of provides her this way to be like, no, it's okay. This is play. Like it's okay to enjoy these things. So I kind of was wondering, like, too, do we think that Chris even realizes this about herself going into the cabin? Mm-hmm. And she's just kept it. Maybe she doesn't realize it at all, or she does and has never spoken it out loud. What do you think, Laron?
Yeah, I love that conversation, because, like you said, she's like, you talk about this movie in such academic like jargon and she's like, and it's something actually more carnal, something a little more primal than that. And I think like both of those things can be true, for different people. Again, there's a generational gap between this, and she's using it as a vessel to understand, her own feelings about it. And this movie helped her see certain parts of herself. And I think it's important to root in there, like, especially, again, as queer people, like for a long time, you don't know, let's say when you're very young, like what those feelings are. You just know you have them. And then society tells you you're not supposed to have those feelings. And yet they come so naturally for you. So you feel like, what's wrong with me, that I have them and they just like breathing air. I see someone attractive and I find them attractive, but I'm not supposed to, like those kinds of questions that you have to ask yourself. And then you have to internalize that for so long, and then you see again a piece of media where someone is just living in that truth in a certain way, and then you say to yourself, I want to be like that, or I want to feel like that, or feel that free, or to be authentic, in that space. Because like I always use this little anecdote about my sexual awakening was actually a very heteronormative movie, which was American Pie, because that came out in 99, 2000, I think, in that era, like right when I was kind of having that kind of confusion about what I was actually attracted to. And I just remember watching it with a group of males, family members, friends, what have you. And I was too young to be watching it, but I, still did. My parents definitely were not very restrictive of what I watched. Thank God. And I remember watching it, and everyone in that whole movie, the pursuit of the characters is they're going after losing their virginity by the end of prom, or by prom and prom night. And they're going after Nadia, Shannon Elizabeth's character. And that's really the whole plot, is like they're just trying to, achieve this thing. And I remember to myself thinking like, this is exciting everyone around me in a way that it is not exciting me, like in terms of like, oh, they're these characters. And weirdly, I was more aroused by the scene with the pie, so it's like, and that felt odd, being isolated in that memory and thinking of that. But it was an aha moment for me. And I wouldn't have known that if I wasn't there having that communal experience with a bunch of people who had a different experience from me, to be able to pinpoint that I have a different attraction than these people. And now I know what that is, like, so media has the power to do that, to kind of convey those things to you non-verbally. And so again, a movie that probably is problematic now, and again has a lot of cringy things that have not aged well, is still a powerful piece of media for me, because it was something that told me that about myself, and so I feel like in this way, in this movie, she's figuring out who that 8-year-old person was at that time, and what they were responding to when they watched that. And Billy, Gillian Anderson's character, is giving her permission to do that without whatever kind of blinders or societal kind of sanctions that would otherwise hinder her from doing that freely, and I think that's what she's facilitating for her in that moment.
And I think we would be remiss to simply characterize what Chris is going through as a sexual awakening or exploration of sexuality. I think there's a really important ingredient to this, which is really, I think, what is so perplexing and what is drawing Chris so closely to Billy, and that look in her eye during that scene. Because obviously, she saw this when she was 8, but she's watched it over and over and over again, and it hits different now. It is obviously there was something she saw in her eyes that she knew she connected with and was drawn to, but couldn't quite verbalize it. And that's dissociation. We see that is what Chris does during sexual moments, is they're not really fully in their body. They are in their head. They are, we don't know what kind of trauma or experiences they've had that have led to this, but we more so hear her talk about how she can't get there with another person. She can't really, and
she has to
that
escape.
is,
Yeah.
yes, that's dissociation. And then I think so part of it is a sexual desire, but I think part of it is recognizing an experience that another person is having that is so similar to your experience, and then crucially them snapping out of it And then really, I think what Chris is more drawn to is how to get to that point of how, despite being outside of my body and dissociating and not being present in that way, how do I shift into pleasure? And you know,
how do I make this? How do I make this something I enjoy and not something I'm trying to evade? You know,
yeah. So I think that that's just a really important aspect of this. Here is, yes, it is all of those other things too, but crucially, it is not just having a sexual awakening, but overcoming this sort of
stigma or
stigma, but also block, or just maybe some trauma that obviously is there.
Well, I mean, and we get from Billy, right? Like, unless I misinterpreted it, like she saw the look in her eyes, and Billy confesses at the end of the movie that was actual sex. Like, she actually was like sexually assaulted on camera in a movie that got released by a major film studio, which is holy cow.
Yeah.
The movie doesn't sit with that too long, but that's pretty heavy stuff, number one. Yeah. And number two, Paris, to what the point you're making is there's a connection there that Bill or that Chris can see that, you know, it's unspoken and she doesn't even realize it when she's watching it. I think, that I think again speaks to, you know, Laron, you're saying, you're like, hey, these movies get made and they get sent off into the ether, and you never know how someone can connect in those moments.
And it kind of implies like that something similar has happened, because for her to connect to that moment at that age specifically is to say something happened to her life where she connected with that feeling of trying to evade this incident in a certain way, and never really being able to get back to a place where sexuality is something that is enjoyable, pleasurable, or desirable, and wanting to, but not having that that, like you said, kind of blockers that kind of don't allow you to do it in an authentic way. So.
And I think too, there's the possibility that it could have changed for her. Like, maybe that wasn't the case when she first saw it, or even the first few times she saw it. But as she got older and rewatches it, you know, things take different meanings and you connect with them differently. And so it's, you know, it's something that might have happened with time. And I also think it's so important that like this was portrayed too, because this is an actual thing that has happened time and time and time again. I mean, there have been so many times that actors have been legitimately sexually assaulted in movies, and that actually be something that is distributed and enjoyed and
consumed and
praised and deemed so many different ways, right? And I think that that's just something we don't explore enough in movies, right? We really just don't. We don't sit with it very long in this one, but the fact that it's being brought up and bringing into discussions is so important. I mean, even if it isn't, you know, I mean, Evan Rachel Wood has talked about being sexually assaulted on camera by Marilyn Manson. Literally, while I was in Paris, someone brought up Last Tango in Paris and described it as a sexy movie. And that is a movie that I personally have not been able to bring myself to watch because I know the story.
You know the story, yeah.
Right. And then you also have like even like Basic Instinct, right? You have that infamous scene with Sharon Stone uncrossing her legs and you know, showing her nether regions, and that is something that has time and time again been discussed and written about and portrayed in many people's minds as empowering. And Sharon Stone comes out and says, I did not feel empowered in that moment. So I just had to like chime in there and say it's like so I'm so grateful that this is something that is being brought up into our discussion. Like, just people who are watching this movie will be thinking about this of like, oh, you can see something on screen and think it's one thing when it completely was something different.
For someone
And
else,
just
yeah.
and it's not uncommon. It's not like something that only happens in this movie, in this fictional setting. Like, it's actually a big problem. So yeah.
Well, I'll shift gears a little bit. And I'm probably gonna throw a trigger warning on the episode just because it's heavy stuff, and I think it's important things to talk about. And again, I think maybe part of the reason sex disappeared from the cinemas for a while was a range of things. But one is Hollywood has a pretty dicey past, especially with the treatment of women. That is a part of why it might not be. There's intimacy coordinators today, for example. On a lighter note, though, let's talk about how they represented the sexual fantasy in that closure, though. Am I right? Holy shit. Went crazy. Where we have the entire camp turning into like the movie set. And Hannah's like, oh, yeah, I get to live up my fantasy. And like she meets Little Death, crawls out of the lake. And I don't know. I thought this was a really impressive way to sort of represent the sexual fantasy. I guess, Paris, again, to your point earlier, it doesn't show the sex actually, it just shows the fantasy that sort of like motivate. And I thought this was really creative. It was super fun because at first I got the sense that like Chris is like, oh my God, am I allowed to be in it? Oh my God, I'm like, she gets this whole range of like, this is weird. Oh, I'm into it. Oh my God, this is really happening. And then she kind of like leans into like the fantasy. And of course you get the big kill sequence, which, at the climax, which the imagery is, incredible.
Pretty great.
Yeah, pretty awesome. What did you guys make of this kind of final sequence? I'll throw it to you first, Laron.
It was just so innovative and so bold, and like again, I use that word radical because it does feel a little radical, and I think that it's just visually so striking. Like there are indelible images in this that I will probably never forget. And that's always great. Like you love that. Like there's already iconic imagery in this that I feel will be repurposed and recontextualized in other pieces of media, moving forward. And so I just felt like I was watching something that I hadn't seen before. And that's always an exciting feeling, especially as someone who consumes as many movies a year as we do. When you see something, you're like, what is this? Like, what am I seeing? What am I witnessing? It's like you're seeing something for the first time. So yeah, I found the surrealism, the visual imagery, the metatextual nature of it, like what's happening, what it's referencing, all of that just so just it's scratching an itch of my brain that I just didn't know that I needed, and so but yes, I thought it was very bold and innovative. So
yeah, Paris, what'd you make of all this?
Yeah, that is a brilliant moment in the movie. I think particularly it's effective because we are seeing her put this into action, the whole sequence is her experience, right? And we are going through this with her. Even the moments where like her agent pops up, Thor and her significant other.
Yeah.
These are all like a visualization of what goes through her brain.
Mm-hmm.
So like maybe she, in a lesser film, we would hear this as VO, right? When you're trying to have sex, you're trying to bring yourself to orgasm or just enjoy the moment and be in your body, but you have intrusive thoughts that are getting in your way. I think many movies would just simply portray that as we're hearing her thoughts, right? We're hearing her worries. And that's kind of, that makes sense. But what makes this sequence so beautiful is it's a visualization of that. And you feel like, of course, the deaths are funny. It's kind of funny to see these characters come in and get their heads chopped off or get shot with arrows or what have you. Like, it's just fun. But it also, like, you feel the annoyance too of like
get out of
girl,
here.
I got somewhere to be.
Focus.
Like,
I'm
yeah.
trying to focus.
And I just think that's just so brilliant and so effective. I just really love it. And I think it's so funny too how I feel like this probably has always been a thing, but I feel like it's becoming more popular in our culture of the sexualization of masked killers. Like Ghostface and Michael Myers and Jason. I mean, and I'm not saying it hasn't been like that since these movies came out. I'm sure it's always been a thing. But you really are seeing a lot more discussions about that. And there's, of course, a whole psychology behind why like women in particular are sexually attracted to masked characters because of the fantasy that comes with it. You can visualize they can look like anything or nothing or whatever. But I just think that that's such a culturally like relevant in this moment right now because we are just being inundated with that like more and more. And it's just really interesting to see that explored in this movie.
Guys, I'm just going to say it. We have in this country in particular, very bizarre relationship with sex, and it has led to a lot of sexual repression, which has led to a lot of people having sexual discoveries in all sorts of very unusual ways. And I think that is manifesting itself in our culture, especially now, in some truly bizarre but really creatively interesting ways. I seriously, because like, you know, if people were having healthy conversations about sex, they probably would, the context for how they're discovering these things would be a lot different. So I just think that was Jane had said something in one of the interviews I was watching with her. It might've been on The Big Picture. I don't know, one of the few interviews, and she was talking about like, we have a really confusing relationship with this thing that we all do and are wired to do. And it leads to all people having discoveries on all sorts of weird ways. But yes, the sexual fetishization of mass killers in our culture didn't have that one on the bingo card, but it has definitely been a thing that's come out of the horror side of the internet post 2020. Now you mentioned
I definitely have a naughty Ghostface T-shirt. I'm not going to lie to you. I have not worn it in public spaces outside of like friends' places, but yes, I do have that. So it is a thing.
Have y'all played Dead by Daylight?
I'm familiar with it. I have not played it, but I'm very familiar with it. I've watched a bunch of people on YouTube play it, rather. Yeah.
Let's just say that is...
It's there. It's in the ether. It's in the
zeitgeist. Might be a big reason why this has become so much more increasingly popular. If you've played it, you'll know what I'm talking about. But anyways, yeah.
Oh man, what a time! I think one major thing I want to hit on before we start to wind down, which is the other side of this thing. We've talked about some of the heavy stuff and some of the really cool, innovative stuff, and the ideas that Jane's tackling that we certainly don't see on the big screen very often. It is also a love letter to the horror genre. It is also a meta movie, very much in the vein of like Scream or the Final Girls. Final Girls, I think it's the plural one. Has a lot in common with those, where it's lovingly portraying a thing, but also making fun of it. And I really, this is where I struggle with the movie a little bit, because man, we get that one shot halfway through the movie, and it was pretty awesome. Like first person POV from Little Dust's perspective, just knocking these people down, beating that guy against the volleyball?
Or whatever the one that goes around.
Tetherball. Yeah, sorry, tetherball pole. That's not volleyball. Tetherball pole. Man, that was just. I was like, I don't think I've seen that before. Certainly not in that way. So a lot of really cool stuff. What did you guys think about how they portrayed the horror genre?
I found that so playful and fun. Like, I don't know. Like, I felt like even when we got sucked into the movie, like I was like, oh, we're really just going to watch this. Like, and that's another thing I think is really interesting. Like with both, I saw the TV Glow and this is like, whatever the in-universe thing is, like, it's weird. I'm like, this is not a real thing, but I feel like I've watched it before, and that's a cool way that they make it feel so specific to something familiar that you've seen, that it feels like it, existing media that you've watched. And so I found like when we were in that universe and watching it play out as the two main characters were watching it, And then occasionally they'd cut out so she could make a comment, like, oh, this is the transphobic moment. And I thought that was just super funny, like it just also seeing how these two people view this media, in a different way. But it felt like someone who really has a reverence for genre, a reverence for this specific type of movie, where that it feels the specificity and the characterization of it just felt super spot on, that I was just impressed by how they were able to create that. Because what I hate more than anything is when you watch a movie and, like, say the actor is preparing for a scene in the movie, and then you realize that you're not really interested in the movie they're making in the story in the movie, but here it feels like a real thing that already exists. And I felt that was really cool. So I liked it felt more like adoration than it did like, so much of a satirization of the whole thing too. So
I will say hats off to that opening credits for this, where you sort of see the entire evolution of the franchise over the last, like, say 40 years or whatever it is. You're like, yes, this is it. This is it. Especially when you get to all the think, but like, it's pretty cool when you see all the sequels. Once you get to the part of the credits where it's doing the think pieces and then the reaction to the think pieces, I was like, oh yeah, this is so real. Jane's got a good finger on the pulse there. And I think the other thing, Laron, you mentioned was sort of, they call it the transphobic moment. I thought that was sort of a playful way to be like, there's a lot of media that's problematic and you're still allowed to like it as long as you can recognize what's problematic about it. At least that was my interpretation. I don't know if that was the right way to read, but that was how I took from it.
Well, like Sleepaway Camp, for example, is specifically, I think, what they're referencing with that, because it's always been seen as like, is this a trans story? Is it a good trans story? Is it a problematic trans story? And you'll have different opinions across the board with even with people within that, trans people who are like, this is the first time I saw a trans character. This was so that it's like, it might be problematic, but in that specific moment, it was a thing that existed for someone to still feel like they were seen. And so it gets to, as Paris said, you kind of get to hold both truths at the same time, and kind of say like, like, I'm experiencing this, and allowing yourself to enjoy something, even if you know that there might be certain things that you intellectually know are probably not kosher, so. But
Paris, what do you think about the Little Death spin on horror?
I loved it. And also, just to that point, I think that moment where Chris is like, oh, this is the transphobic part, or whatever it is that she says, that it kind of is like a little warning. It's kind of like, okay, audience, like, you're about to like hear some stuff that's gonna probably be like,
we're doing a thing.
Yeah, we're doing a thing. Stick with us. Like, and I thought that was a nice, clever way to, like, kind of prepare the audience, because it is kind of jarring, like, and much like it is going back and watching old movies that do have these, like, blatantly racist or transphobic or sexist things, you're kind of taken aback sometimes, because it is kind of like that. And so I kind of appreciated that, because to your point, it is holding those two truths of, she loves this film but can recognize this, but also, like, a little nod to the audience, be prepared.
We're in on this. We're in on this. We're not doing it. We're in on it. Yeah.
And I have to say, I absolutely, as soon as I saw in the opening credits that Jack Haven was playing Little Death, I got so excited.
Yeah, that was cool.
I thought Jack Haven's performance as Little Death was absolutely brilliant. I think what it was for me is the way that Jack's using Little Death's body, like the movements, the stiltedness, the just all of those little things, because you're not seeing the face very much. And so it really is body and using the space, and just I just thought it was brilliant. And also, you're seeing absolutely direct references to Sleepaway Camp with the mouth agape and the wide eyes, and like there's no question that this is one of the movies that this is referencing, you know. And I, like Caleb said, just all the stuff you're seeing, like this world building within the first few minutes of the film with the VHS tapes. I think there's even one that's like Camp Miasma 3000.
Yeah.
Yes.
They were like little spin-offs and
awesome.
stuff. Yeah.
It's just awesome. I love it. But I also appreciate too how, you know, it feels like with the horror genre, which, you know, we all love horror movies. We're big slasher fans. We're big horror fans. But it is a very oversaturated genre. And
Oh, yeah.
it feels like everything that could be done has been done. And I feel like that was what was cool about this was Little Death was a new, like, unique character. There, you know, it was very derivative in many ways, but it really felt like something that could be its own, that people would dress up as, and that people
They probably
would
will
be
now,
fans of.
but
Oh, absolutely, and I'm looking forward to it. So I thought that that's a really hard thing to pull off, is to make a storyline that not only is derivative enough that it's obvious that we are alluding to 80s and 90s classics, but it also really feels like it could be its own thing. Like,
Yeah.
and I just really found it to be fun. We were laughing so hard every time someone's head would get chopped off, just
Yeah.
because of how over dramatic the blood was.
Yeah.
But it was so awesome because Caleb,
volcano.
earlier you said it was a messy movie, like literally and figuratively, a very messy
Yes.
movie.
Yeah.
In all the ways.
And I also love Ava Victor as the punk rock Mohawk DJ. Oh my God. Like it was fun. It was a lot of fun. And it felt like it, like I think Laron earlier, you said it, like it scratches an itch that like only like genre horror can. And I'm a big fan for sure. You can tell Jane loves horror.
Yes.
And
She loves it.
yeah.
Like definitely for sure.
Yeah, I thought the other thing I did in terms of the meta, and they didn't go as deep into the industry insights, but we did get that really fun pitch session, Zoom call. That was that. Okay, I haven't been on a pitch session like that for a movie. Certainly not at a movie of that kind of budget. But it felt, as a person who has followed the industry for a while and heard a lot of stories about how these go, it felt very probably what a lot of pitch sessions go like.
Yeah. They're like, we're going to collect our thoughts about what you've just said, and then we're going to get back to you.
We'll circle back with you.
Back.
Yeah, they used all the corporate jargon stuff that we're all probably familiar with. We were like, oh gosh, wow,
they hate this idea. It's like, yeah.
I just yeah, I know, and I love that we got Dylan Baker as like the sort of like executive producer. He was so funny, and I feel like I've met people like him who manage budgets for projects like that, and yeah, it was really priceless. Certainly ended in a different way than I expected, and it was all the better for it. But yeah, I just want to give a tip of the hat to that one. I don't know, you guys have probably been in pitch sessions for movies. Is it in any way parallel your experiences?
I have witnessed other people have it. I haven't myself had a professional one. Maybe one day, you know. And it is cringe and scary, and it's like, for me, like doing stand-up comedy for the first time or something, like where you are exposed and they are like analyzing every detail, every syllable of what you're saying, and so it becomes that much more pressure. So you feel so bad for them, you just want them to like the idea, or at least give them some glimmer of hope that it could happen. But more times than not, if it's not like some straightforward formulaic thing, they're normally like, but who's the audience? But who wants to see this? And it's like, and you can kind of see the mechanics working, and where the rigidness is in studio executive made films, you know, and why they don't take chances on movies like this very often, but clearly there's an appetite for them, you know, so.
And I think too, even if you haven't had that specific experience of pitching something in this specific way, I think we all can relate to that moment where you're expressing something you're really excited about or passionate about, and people just looking at you like you're crazy.
Because they don't
I
understand it.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah. So, like, even if it hasn't been specifically like in a pitch session with executives, I feel like that is something that, you know, a lot of people can relate to, because I think that that's also part of being like a cinephile or an artist or someone who creates, is like, there's people who get it and there's people who don't. And I think that with Hannah Einbender's acting in that scene and Jane's direction, I feel like we just feel that feeling in that moment. And
Yeah.
I that was one of my favorite moments, was just that moment of, I mean, just being like in a panic that just becomes more and more of a panic, because the more and more you talk, the worse and worse your anxiety is. And
Like, I'm digging a hole. Oh no! Like, how do I get out of this hole?
Yeah.
Because you clearly realize you've lost them. Yeah. Boy. And then her agent texts her right after it's over, and it's like, oh no.
Oh, you heard it? Yeah. I heard the pitch went great.
With the money, with the money sign, you're like, oh
Yeah.
god, it's just cringe.
Also, just great supporting cast all around. Like
Yeah.
everyone's little cameo, no matter how small it was. Even Jasmine Savoy Brown, like, just so fun, just seeing all these people pop up for a little moment of delight. So
Yes, and we see the guy from Mulholland Drive.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
As the clerk, as the gas station clerk, or whatever store that you would consider that. I thought that was delightful.
Yeah.
Especially since right now there's a trending audio on TikTok that quotes him in
Yeah.
Really?
I love how she when she realizes, she goes back and she's like super excited. She was like, "Oh, don't forget, was it Nubile?" Where she's like trying to forget
Nubile,
like, because she knows every line of the movie. She's just like all giddy and excited about what's happening in front of her. So yeah, I found that was a lot of fun too. But
All right, guys. Well, we could actually keep this conversation going for another 2 hours, because, believe it or not, listeners, there is still actually a lot more we could talk about, and we've all only seen the film one time. So, I'll just close on my bit saying I love a lot of the films. There was the connective tissue between the satire and like some of the bigger ideas were a little off, but man, this is absolutely a film you got to see in 2026 if you're any sort of self-respecting cinephile. Bold swings, big ideas, and seriously, singular talent, singular vision, and just an impressive production. Is there anything else either of you would like to say about Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma before we wrap up?
Just to go support it. We want to see more movies like this, and the only way we get to is if people go out and watch them. So it might be, maybe you haven't seen this filmmaker's work, but maybe this will encourage you to go back and look at it. It's very unique. And there's a lot of things, as we've mentioned, a lot of things in it that you might connect to in different ways. And so highly recommend people go out and see it.
I'll just add, stay through to the end of the credits.
Oh yes. Yeah. You actually get rewarded. I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Final thing. Humble brag. I was very lucky to see this. It was playing in 35 millimeter at the Seattle International Film Festival downtown theater. Paris, actually the exact same theater your short film played in earlier this year. Firstly, it was like a Monday night after it'd been out for a couple of days. I was like, it'll probably be pretty like packed house. Number one. Number two, it looked incredible on the film. Like, this is the nostalgia piece, the components. It fits the aesthetic of the Miasma film so well. So anyway, especially if you can go to a theater and see it on film. I had the option to watch this on a digital press screener, and I waited because I really wanted to see it on 35 millimeter, and I think that was the right call. So if you have a chance to see it at all, support. If you're anywhere near a place that plays it on film, that like the extra mile, go there. It's worth it. All right, listeners, that is our review of Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma. Paris, great catching up with you. Great chatting with you. Really glad that we got to finally share the mic and talk about a Jane Schoenbrun film together. Where can people follow you and all the great things you're doing online?
I'm mostly just on Instagram. You can follow me at Paris Burris on Instagram. I also have a Letterboxd, which is also at Paris Burris. And yeah, that's where you can find me.
Excellent. Check out Paris's takes. A lot of good ones there. Laron, Chapman, where can people find you online?
You can find me here, obviously, for more Cinematropolis podcast. Also, I have a review column here, Real Insights with Laron Chapman, also on the cinematropolis.com. I also write for the Oklahoma Gazette once a month, so check that out if you're in Oklahoma City. And then I'm also on Letterboxd. The handle is black_Cine_man.
I'll throw an extra plug in there for you, Laron. I Want Your Sex, a film that is probably not playing in too many theaters still, but it did have a very short, limited run here in the U.S. Greg Araki film. You and Paris have talked about it separately on this podcast. You did a nice little review column for us over at thecinematropolis.com. So if you're wanting to keep the conversations about sex and cinema going, you can go read Laron's reaction to I Want Your Sex over there. Sadly, and bizarrely, it did not play in Seattle. I had to drive it would have been like a 45-minute drive to get to.
Oh, wow.
I don't understand. Questions I have for the city of Seattle, because I feel like this is the right market for that sort of thing. But still on my bingo card, Laron, I'll get it for the years ever. I Want Your Sex. I will see it. I will find it. I will see it. And there's going to be sex. Listeners, thanks so much for joining us. You can follow me at cinematropolis.com, all social media channels at CMasters Talk. That's letter C Masters Talk. We'll be back on our summer wrap up next week. We'll catch you again next time.